Hi guys, Katarina here. Welcome to my YouTube channel. I hope you're doing well. If you are new here, make sure you subscribe. In this video, I have for you two very simple cards for the summer. I will share with you how to watercolor a watermelon in two ways. One will be a half slice and the other one will be a background with quarter slices. And along the way, I will share with you a few tips with what I learned. Of course, you do not have to make a card, you can do whatever you want, but I'm a card maker, that's what I do. This video is part of my No Stamps, No Dies series. Minimal supplies, definitely perfect for beginners because I'm a beginner myself. So let's get started. I will start with the supplies and few tips. If you want to skip through this, just fast forward 3 or 4 minutes, maybe more, or click on the timestamp. The list of the supplies I'm using is in the description below. You guys, you do not need to get the exact brands I have, just get what you have at home. That's exactly what I did. And my supplies are not the best out there anyway. If you only have or can afford cheap paints for kids, go for it. That's exactly what I did when I started. It might not give you the best results, but using cheaper supplies is way better than not painting at all. Since I'm watercoloring, I have here my watercolors. I'm using the palette from Winsor & Newton. Then I have a few brushes in different sizes. This worked for me. You might need only one. I cut down a few panels with watercolor cardstock. This one is the Canson XL Cold Press 300 GSM watercolor paper. 300 GSM, or in the US 140 pounds, is the weight, very important. For watercoloring, I would definitely not recommend getting anything lighter than that. I have two jars with water, one for clean and one for dirty water. On the side, I have a kitchen paper to dry up my brush and soak up excess water. Then I have here a pencil and an eraser. And also I have a compass to draw the half of a melon. If you don't have a compass, you can use a plate or something like that. Our plates at home are square, so I could not use them. And I do have a compass. I bought it exactly for this kind of occasion, so I'm using it. I have few card bases that I pre-cut and pre-scored. I will end up using the black and the white. If you don't have a paper to make your card bases yourself, you can buy a pack of card bases. They sell them usually with envelopes. Or you can get a watercolor cardstock in the size A5. You can fold it and you get a standard A6 card. Just be careful when you are folding it because it's a thick paper. The last thing I have here is a double-sided tape to adhere the watercolor panel on top of a card base, and that's all for the supplies. Before we start, I want to share with you a few tips. Number one, make sure you practice. I know, who would have thought? Here is my practice piece. As I said, I'm a beginner, I'm just learning, and I can confirm taking at least one sheet of watercolor cardstock and having a practice run is very helpful. I'm going to do the wet on wet technique. That means you wet the brush as well as the paper. And I like to get the feel of how the colors are spreading in the water and how much water you need to apply. Water control is something I'm not really good at. And since we are going to be watercoloring a watermelon that has this white bit between the red and the green, you do not want these colors to be mixing. All you need to understand is when to stop adding especially the red so it doesn't float into the green. And having a practice run will definitely help you with that. I will start with a half a melon. This was my initial idea. I got the idea from this book. I bought it at Aldi or Lidl, not sure which one. I thought the example in this book was for a half a melon, but as you can see, they did here a quarter slice, so I thought that's a great idea as well, and that's what inspired my next card. I have here my watercolor panel. I taped it to a board with a washi tape. This helps reduce the warping of the paper. If you have a spare cutting board, you can use that together with a low-tack tape. You don't have to do this. If your paper warps, you can just put it into a book overnight. First, I will sketch the watermelon with my compass. As I said, you can just use a plate or go freehand. Next, I sprayed my watercolors with clear water to activate them. I will be directly using them from the pan because I want the colors to be bright and bold as much as possible. Plus, I'm not really good at mixing the colors on a palette anyway. However, I did mix the water with a little bit of yellow on the side, and I will be adding it to the clear water. You don't need to do this. This is just for you to see it better in the video. I first started with the green bit of the melon. You can go first with the red and then the green. I tried that, but for me I got better results when I did the green part first. I used my smaller brush and I applied the water onto the edge of the pencil line. Not too much water. I just didn't want the green to be spreading too much, and I also didn't want the water to be pooling. After I applied the green, I went in with a clean brush, not too wet, and I helped the color to spread a bit. I even applied a little bit more green for those parts that I felt are too light. You can leave it to dry completely if you don't want the colors to be mixing. I applied the clean water on the rest of the watermelon right away, but the green part was already slightly dry anyway. I left a very tiny gap next to the green without any water, but because the green part was still slightly wet, the red did seep through, but not too much, which I do like. I just did not want it to be mixing too much, because red and green are complementary colors on the color wheel, and when they mix, they might create muddy colors. Once I applied the clear water, I went in with the red paint. As you can see, I'm using a bigger brush for that, Dollar and Rounding number 10. And I made sure to leave a gap about 1 centimeter to 5 millimeter wide between the green part and the red part, because it will spread out by itself. You can also leave a bigger gap if you don't want the colors to be mixing at all, and that's why it's good to do some practice first. Also, when I was applying the red to the bottom of the watermelon, I made my brush a little bit more wet, as the bottom part was a little bit dry. I only used red, but you can also use pinks or purples, or you can also apply all these colors and mix them up. Before painting the seeds, let the piece dry completely, either air dry, or if you have a heat gun or a hair dryer, you can use that. I prefer air drying. I'm using my heat gun here just for the video, but I stopped after a few seconds. For some reason, I have more patience for air drying than drying with a heat gun. After the piece was dry, I painted the seeds. I just painted them randomly. The color of the paint I'm using here is gray. You can also use black as well, or mix it with a little bit of brown and then let it dry. Before I will make it into a cat, let's paint first the background with the quarter slices. Of course, you do not have to make a background. You can paint just one large piece, but because I already done that with the half a melon, I thought I will paint a few smaller images and put them together and create a background. Again, I taped the watercolor cardstock to a board using a washi tape. And because I'm going to be painting smaller images, I'm using smaller brushes, one little bit bigger, one little bit smaller. I will not use a pencil here to draw a shape. If you want, you can do that. I went directly with a clean water, again mixed with yellow so you can see what I'm doing. And I created a triangle with curved bottom, and I covered it with a clean water. Just make sure the water is not pooling. In this case, I will start with the red and then I will add the green, but you can go the other way as well. For the half a melon, it was for me more difficult when I started with the red first, but for the quarter slices, it was easy. To avoid the colors mixing and also making sure you have the white part as well, the best is to stop applying the red about 1.5 centimeter to 2 centimeters from the bottom. If you see that the water is pooling or you see the color is spreading too far, just use a paper towel and dab it off. I repeated this process on all of the quarter slices of melon on the background. Also, don't forget to add some pieces along the edges so you don't have any weird white empty spaces once you take the washi tape off. I even went back, put the washi tape back on, and painted in a few additional pieces. Once I was done, I let it dry and then I added the black seeds. I think after painting the seeds, even the pieces I wasn't too happy with ended up looking great. Keep in mind that these are watercolors, so you might not get the exact results even if you are using the same supplies I do. You really just need to play with it. I will speed up the video a bit and play a little bit of music so you can see the whole process, and I will be back in a bit. I hope it's not too fast. If you want me to slow down, let me know. So the painting is finished. I really had fun. If you have any questions, let me know in the comments. To finish up the cards, of course, you can also frame this. I think it would look lovely hanging on the wall, and I might do this in the future, but I'm making cards, so now the panels are done, I will make them into cards. If you stop here, you might also want to add some splatter. I forgot about this at first, and I will do that in a bit, but I did not press the record button, so I don't have any footage from that anyway. To make the cards, first, one thing I do most of the time, if not all the time, when I'm adhering a panel that is the same size as the card base, I cut about 2 millimeters of each side, so 4 times 2 millimeters. This creates sort of a frame, and I find it easier to adhere, but you do not have to do this. So you can adhere the panel on top of a card base as it is without any sentiment. If you don't know what a sentiment is, when I talk to my husband about sentiments, he tells me that he needs to think about what the heck I mean. Well, a sentiment is the words that you put on top of a card, like happy birthday, thank you, and so on. If you are good at hand lettering, or at least you are happy with your handwriting, you can write your own sentiment, or you can use a printer or a Dymo label maker that embosses. Well, I definitely cannot do hand lettering. Every time I see someone making a card where they also hand letter the sentiment, I just skip it. My handwriting is also not the best, and I do not have a printer or a label maker. But as a card maker, I have a lot of stamps with sentiments, and I thought, why not to use it? I know this card is part of the No Stamps, No Dice series, but I mean it mainly for the main image. And adding a sentiment to your card is just an optional thing. A card does not always need to have a sentiment. And maybe there is someone who would like to add a sentiment to their card and never thought about stamps. So let's do it. I'm using two different stamp sets. One, this big bold Celebrate stamp set, and for the other one, I'm using a small stamp set with Happy Birthday. For the smaller sentiment stamp, all you need is an acrylic block and an ink. I'm using the VersaFine ink in Onyx Black. This is my favorite black ink and I just stamp it on top of the panel. For the big bold sentiment, I would recommend using a stamping tool, especially when you are stamping on a watercolor cardstock. It usually leaves gaps without any ink after the first stamping. With a stamping tool, you can restamp without any problems, and I had to do it a few times here. I'm using the stamping tool for most of my stamping. This one I'm using here is quite expensive. When I got it, there were no alternatives, but now there are quite a few. If you want to use stamps, I would highly recommend that you get it. As I said, I added a little bit of splatter to the panels. I thought I pressed the record button, but I did not, so I don't have any footage of it. I'm really sorry. I will show it to you the next time I'm watercoloring. But you do not need to add splatter to your paintings anyway. This is completely optional. I like to do it when I'm watercoloring. To me, it makes the painting a little bit more interesting. Sometimes I forget it, sometimes I don't do it intentionally because it's so cliché. But if you want to add splatter to your painting, you can do it once the painting is dry or whilst you're watercoloring, but keep in mind it will mix with your colors. Here I just mix the colors I use for the watermelon with a little bit of water and I dipped a slightly damp brush in it. To get the droplets onto the cardstock, I tapped my finger on the brush. The bigger the brush you use, the bigger will be the splatter. I used a brush in the size 6. So I added the sentiment, the splatter. The only thing that is left is to add the panels on top of the card bases. I'm using here a double-sided tape. You can also use a liquid glue. I would not really recommend using a glue stick. In my experience, it just warps the paper. You can also add some embellishments like sequins, but since I already added the stamping, I did not want to add too many things that are too specific to card making. This is supposed to be for beginners and for everyone. So the cards are finished. I'm really happy with the result. Actually, I was not even planning to paint the quarter slices, and I'm happy that I did. I hope you will make this project yourself as well. If you do and you post on Instagram, don't forget to tag me or use the hashtag NordicBee. I hope you liked this video. If you did, I would really appreciate if you gave this video a thumbs up and also subscribe to my channel if you haven't done so already. I make cards with stamps, but I would like to make more and more cards like these. You can follow me on Instagram and Pinterest and also check out my new blog nordicbee.weebly.com where I have more photos of these cards. All links are in the description below. Thank you all so much for watching and I will see you in my next video.